Once upon a time there was a boy called Aladdin. He lived with his widowed mother. They were very poor. One day when Aladdin was out playing with some friends, a stranger came up to them. "Can you tell me if Aladdin lives near here?" he asked. "Yes, I am Aladdin," said the boy, speaking up. "I am your uncle, Aladdin. Your father was my brother, and I have come to see you and your mother," said the stranger, who didn't look much like an uncle. Aladdin took the man to his home and told his mother that his uncle was here and that he needed some help with a special job, and could Aladdin go with him? Aladdin's mother said that would be all right, as the man was his uncle. So off they went together. "Where are we going?" asked Aladdin. "Up the hillside to a cave," replied the uncle. "When we were younger, me and your father hid some things in the cave, but I'm too big to get it out. That's why I need your help." When they'd nearly reached the top of the hill, they came to a hole in the ground. This was the hole the uncle was talking about, and he wanted Aladdin to go down it. It was very dark, and Aladdin wasn't sure, but the uncle had a special ring on his finger, and he said Aladdin could have it if he went down the hole. "What do you want me to find down here?" Aladdin asked. "Oh, nothing much," said the uncle. "Just a lamp I want back. Nothing very special about it, but I liked it." So Aladdin, wearing his new ring, went into the hole. He could hardly believe his eyes. There was a cave full of gold and treasure. "Come on," called the uncle. "Get me the lamp." "Are you sure that's all you want, uncle?" Aladdin couldn't believe that with all this treasure his uncle only wanted an old lamp. But he found it and took it back to where his uncle was waiting. "Quick," shouted the uncle, "give me the lamp." "Help me out first," said Aladdin. "Just give me the lamp." The uncle sounded very cross, but Aladdin hung on to the lamp. He wasn't giving it up until he was out of the cave. "If you don't give me the lamp, I shall trap you in the cave," shouted the uncle, who was really angry now. "No," shouted back Aladdin. "First get me out." But the uncle had closed up the hole. Aladdin was trapped. Aladdin sat down to figure out how he could get out of the cave. He looked at his new ring, and he gave it a polish. All of a sudden there was a flash and a big puff of smoke, and a strange-looking man with a turban on his head appeared before him. "I am the genie of the ring, and you are my master. Your wish is my command." "What do you mean?" asked Aladdin. "I will do for you whatever you wish," replied the genie. "Well, I'd quite like to go home," said Aladdin. And no sooner had he said it, he was standing at his house with the lamp in his hands. He rushed into the house to tell his mother what had happened, and polished the ring again to see if the genie appeared. It did. "What do you wish?" asked the genie. "We'd like some food, please," said Aladdin. Aladdin's mother couldn't believe it. There was more food on her table than she'd ever seen in her life before. 1 week later, Aladdin's mother was doing the cleaning. She picked up the old lamp Aladdin had brought from the cave and gave it a good rub with her duster. And to her surprise, in a huge puff of smoke, an even bigger genie appeared. This new genie was more powerful than the genie of the ring. So that is why the man who said he was my uncle wanted the lamp so much, thought Aladdin. With this genie, we can have everything we could wish for. And within 1 week, Aladdin and his mother had a beautiful new house with new furniture and servants to do all the work. All I want now, said Aladdin to his mother, is to marry the emperor's daughter. His mother didn't think the princess would want to marry her son, but she went to see the emperor with a gift of beautiful jewels. The emperor said no, but every day Aladdin went to see the princess with more gifts, and when the princess said she loved Aladdin and wanted to marry him, the emperor finally said yes. Aladdin asked the genie to build them a beautiful palace, which he did, and he and his princess were very happy. One day when Aladdin was out, a man who was really the wicked uncle knocked on the door trying to get his lamp back, and the princess, not knowing about the magic lamp, decided to give it away and buy a new one. When Aladdin got home, he found the princess and the lamp gone. He called up the genie of the ring. "Get me back the princess and the lamp," he cried. "I cannot," replied the genie. "The magic of the lamp is too strong, but I will take you to where they are." Aladdin found himself in the wicked uncle's house, but thankfully the princess was there. "We must get the lamp so we can go back to the palace," said Aladdin to the princess. So very quietly, when the uncle was asleep, they took the lamp back, called for the genie, and wished themselves back to their palace. When they were safely back in their home again, Aladdin wished for the wicked uncle to be lost in the desert, unable to find his way out, so they would never see him again. And Aladdin and his princess lived happily ever after.
Hansel and Gretel. In a small cottage deep in the forest, there once lived a boy called Hansel and his sister Gretel. Their mother was dead, and they lived with their father and his new wife, their stepmother, who hated children. The family were very poor and had little to eat. One day, all they had left was 1 loaf of bread. The children's stepmother spoke to their father.
"You cannot feed all of us," she said, "so you must get rid of the children. Tomorrow we will take them to the forest and leave them there."
Their father was scared of his wife, and so agreed to do as she said. Outside, Hansel and Gretel heard the plan. That night, Hansel did not eat his bread for supper. Instead, he put it in his pocket. The wicked stepmother led the way deep into the forest the next day. Unknown to her, Hansel laid a trail of breadcrumbs behind him along the path. When they reached the middle of the forest, the children were told to rest on a tree stump, and their stepmother and father went off, saying that they were going to chop wood. It grew dark. The children realized that they had been deserted. Gretel was very frightened. "Don't worry," said Hansel. "I left a trail of breadcrumbs along the path for us to follow." But when the children looked for the trail of breadcrumbs, they found the birds had eaten it, and the children were lost. The two children huddled together miserably. The next morning, Hansel and Gretel set off to try to find their way home. They wandered around for hours, hopelessly lost. They were miserable and hungry. In despair, they sat down to rest. Suddenly, a beautiful white bird flew out from behind a tree. It was not afraid of the children and fluttered in the trees above their heads. Then it landed beside the two children. Gretel watched the little bird strutting past her toes and laughed with delight when it stopped to peck at her dress. "I think it wants to be our friend," she told Hansel. The bird moved back and forth in front of the children. When at last it fluttered off into the forest, they decided to follow. The bird kept within sight of the two children. Wherever it went, they could see its bright white feathers through the trees. It led them to another clearing in the forest. When the two children emerged from the trees, they saw that the little bird had settled on the roof of a small cottage in the clearing. The cottage was brightly coloured and smelt delicious. When the children moved closer, they realised that the house was made entirely of sweets and cakes. The walls were gingerbread, striped candy framed the window, and the door was made from chocolate. Everywhere the house was decorated with multicoloured jellies and toffees. Hungrily, Hansel took a bite from a fairy cake flower pot. At that very moment, the door opened and an old woman appeared. She was ugly and wizened, but she gave the children a very sweet smile.
"You look starving, my dears," she croaked. "Come inside and have a proper meal."
The cottage was warm and cosy, and Hansel and Gretel felt safe as they tucked into the delicious food. When they had eaten enough, the old woman gathered the plates together.
"Hansel, please help me to clear the table," she said.
Hansel followed her through to the kitchen. Suddenly, the old woman pushed him through another door and into a big cage.
"You look particularly tasty," she cackled.
The old woman was a wicked witch who used her gingerbread house to trap children to eat. The witch wanted to fatten Hansel up before she ate him, so she put poor Gretel to work, cooking enormous meals for Hansel. Every day, the witch would feel Hansel's finger to see whether he was fat enough to eat. But Hansel soon realized that the witch had poor eyesight. She felt his finger because she could not see him clearly. So he kept a chicken bone from one of his meals. Every day, he would hold out the chicken bone instead of his finger for her to feel. And every day, the witch would scream at Gretel.
"Your brother is too thin. Put some more meat in the oven. Bake some more bread. Give him more food."
This went on for many days. As long as the witch thought that Hansel was too thin, he was safe. But one day, the witch lost patience.
"I have waited long enough," she screeched. "If I cannot make Hansel any fatter, then I shall have to eat him as he is."
She turned to Gretel.
"Go and get more firewood, girl," she said.
poking poor Gretel in the back with her walking stick.
"And build up the fire. You can help me to cook Hansel for supper."
When he heard this, Hansel shook with fear. Gretel, tears of misery and fear running down her cheeks, went to do as she had been ordered. Was there no way to put a stop to this woman's evil plan? Gretel was gathering firewood when she suddenly had an idea which might save Hansel's life. She carried on stoking the fire, which would heat the enormous oven. After a while, it was red hot. She turned round and spoke shyly to the witch. "I'm not sure whether the oven is hot enough. Could you come and look at it?" Gretel opened the big oven doors and stood back as the witch, grumbling and complaining, hobbled up to take a look. Just as the witch bent over to look inside the oven, Gretel gave her an almighty push. The witch fell screeching into the oven. Quickly, Gretel slammed the heavy doors shut. Gretel took the key for Hansel's cage and unlocked the door and let him out. But Hansel was not the only captive. In other rooms there were many other cages, holding all kinds of woodland creatures which the witch kept to use for her evil spells. Hansel and Gretel opened every cage and set them all free. Only the witch's black cat and slimy pet toad were sorry that the witch was dead. They stood in front of the oven doors, looking mournful. Hansel grabbed the witch's walking stick and chased them out of the cottage. "Go away and don't come back," he shouted as he ran after them. The toad slowly hopped off in one direction, and the cat went in another. Hansel went back into the cottage. When all the forest creatures had been set free, Hansel and Gretel took a good look round. In the attic, high up in the eaves, half hidden under a dusty old blanket, the two children found a large wooden chest. Hansel ran and got an axe and broke the chest open. It was crammed full of gold, silver, and jewels. Knowing that they need never be poor again, Hansel and Gretel packed 2 large sacks with as much as they could carry. Then they went back downstairs to the kitchen, where they wrapped up some bread and cheese to take with them on their journey. With one last look at the cottage where they had been held prisoners for so long, they set off into the forest. At first, the children were unsure where to go. They did not know how to find their way home, and even if they did get there, their stepmother would surely send them away again. However, they had not gone far into the forest when they met a woodcutter, who told them that their father was searching for them. Their stepmother had died, and now their father, sorry for what she had made him do to the children, wanted them back home. The children were overjoyed to hear this news. Then all the woodland creatures who had been set free from the cottage appeared through the trees. To show their gratitude, the animals and birds were going to guide the children safely home. It was a long journey through the forest, but at last, when they reached the shores of a lake, they knew that they were close to home. Their house lay a short distance from the other side. They were tired, and it would take them a long time to walk around the lake. But a big white swan kindly took them both across. Hansel and Gretel ran all the way home. Hearing their excited shouts, their father came out to meet them, overjoyed and full of remorse. The children hugged him and told him all about their adventures. Then Hansel showed him their sacks full of treasure. Hand in hand, all 3 went into the house, happy that the days of sadness and poverty were over.
Once upon a time there were 3 bears, Daddy Bear, Mummy Bear, and Baby Bear, who lived in a very pretty cottage deep in the forest. One day Mummy Bear was cooking porridge for breakfast. Daddy Bear and Baby Bear sat down to eat their porridge, but Mummy Bear had made it much too hot. "Why don't we go for a walk while the porridge cools down?" Daddy Bear said in his deep Daddy Bear voice. "That's a good idea. It will be just right to eat when we get back," said Mummy Bear in her soft Mummy Bear voice. "Yippee!" squeaked Baby Bear in a very squeaky Baby Bear voice. So off went the 3 bears into the forest. In the village lived a little girl called Goldilocks, who had wandered off too far into the forest, and now she was lost. She wasn't very worried, but she was getting a bit tired when she came across the 3 bears' cottage. "I wonder who lives there," she thought. She went to knock on the front door. Knock, knock, knock. But nobody answered, as the 3 bears were still out on their walk. Goldilocks pushed gently on the front door, and it slowly opened. "Hello," she called. "Anyone at home?" When there was still no answer, Goldilocks, who was a very curious little girl, stepped into the cottage. She thought, "something smells nice." She went into the kitchen, and there on the table were the 3 bowls of porridge. "Yummy," said Goldilocks, "my favourite," and forgetting that this wasn't her house, sat down to try the porridge. She tried the biggest bowl first. "Yuck," she said, "too much salt." So she tried the medium bowl of porridge. "Yuck," she said, "too much sugar." So she tried the little bowl of porridge. "Yummy, this is just right." And she ate it all up. She went into the next room, where she found 3 chairs. She tried the big chair. "Oh no, this chair's much too big." So she tried the medium chair. "No, this chair's still not right." So she tried the little chair. "Yes, this chair's just a nice size for me." But as she sat on the chair, the legs snapped, and she landed on the floor with a bump. Goldilocks decided to look upstairs. In the bedroom, she found 3 beds. She lay on the big one. "Oh no, this bed is much too hard." And so she tried the medium-sized bed. "This bed is much too soft." So Goldilocks got on the little bed, which was exactly right for her, and she fell fast asleep. Meanwhile, the 3 bears had come back from their walk, feeling very, very hungry. They went straight into the kitchen for their porridge. Daddy Bear looked at his bowl. "Who's been eating my porridge?" he said in his loud voice. Mummy Bear looked at her bowl. "Who's been eating my porridge?" she said in her soft voice. Baby Bear looked at his bowl. "Who's been eating my porridge and eaten it all up?" he said in a very squeaky voice. The 3 bears went to sit down. They couldn't understand what had happened to their breakfast. Daddy Bear sat down. "Who's been sitting in my chair?" he said in an even louder voice. Mummy Bear sat down. "Who's been sitting in my chair?" she said in an even softer voice. Baby Bear went to sit down, and then burst into tears. "Whoever's been sitting in my chair has broken it," he said in a very sad, squeaky voice. The three bears thought this was all very strange. They went to take a look upstairs. Daddy Bear looked at his bed.
"Who's been sleeping in my bed?"
he said in a very, very loud voice, because he was quite cross now. Mummy Bear looked at her bed. "Who's been sleeping in my bed?" she said in a very soft voice, because she couldn't understand this. Baby Bear looked at his bed. "Whoever's been sleeping in my bed is still there," said his squeaky voice, so loudly that it woke up Goldilocks, who had been fast asleep. She sat up, looked at the three bears, and screamed. "Ah!" Off the bed she jumped and quickly ran down the stairs and out of the cottage. The three bears never saw her again. The Great Big Turnip. Once upon a time, in Russia, an old man planted some turnip seeds. Each year he grew good turnips, but this year he was especially proud of one very big turnip. He left it in the ground longer than the others and watched with amazement and delight as it grew bigger and bigger. It grew so big that no one could remember ever having seen such a huge turnip before. At last it stopped growing, and the old man decided that the time had come to pull it up. He took hold of the leaves of the great big turnip and pulled and pulled. But the turnip did not move. So the old man called his wife to come and help him. The old woman pulled the old man, and the old man pulled the turnip. Together they pulled and pulled. But the turnip did not move. So the old woman called her granddaughter to come and help. The granddaughter pulled the old woman pulled the old man, and the old man pulled the turnip. Still, the turnip did not move. The granddaughter called to the dog to come and help. The dog pulled the granddaughter pulled the old woman pulled the old man, and the old man pulled the turnip. But the great big turnip stayed firmly in the ground. The dog called to the cat to come and help pull up the turnip. The cat pulled the dog pulled the granddaughter pulled the old woman pulled the old man, and the old man pulled the turnip. They all pulled and pulled as hard as they could. But still the turnip did not move. Then the cat called to a mouse to come and help pull up the great big turnip. The mouse pulled the cat pulled the dog pulled the granddaughter pulled the old woman pulled the old man, and he pulled the big turnip. Together they pulled and pulled and pulled as hard as they could. Suddenly, the great big turnip came out of the ground and everyone fell over.
Sleeping Beauty. A long time ago and far away there lived a king and a queen. They were very happy, for their first child, a girl, had been born. "We must have a grand christening for her," said the king, who was delighted to have a daughter. "We must invite all the fairies of the kingdom to bless her," said the queen. "How many are there now?" asked the king. 12 or 13, said his wife. "Send the invitations. We'll soon find out." There were 12 fairies, and they were all sent invitations. A 13th fairy had not been heard of for so long that it was presumed that she was dead. No invitation was sent. The day of the christening was sunny and bright. The princess was named Briar Rose, and the fairies began to give their gifts. "She shall be beautiful," said the first. "She shall be wise," said the second. "She shall be good," said the third. "She shall be kind," said the fourth. The gifts continued in this way, wishing all that was good for Briar Rose. 11 of the 12 fairies had given their gifts when the room suddenly went dark. After a great flash of light, a small, dark figure stood in front of the king and queen. It was the 13th fairy.
"Why wasn't I invited to the christening?"
she screamed. She was furious at being left out.
"All the fairies of the kingdom have given their blessings. Well, here's mine for the princess. On her 16th birthday, she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die."
Another flash of light, and the fairy was gone.
"But we thought she was dead," said the king. "What can we do?"
The queen was in tears. The 12th fairy stepped forward. "There is still my gift for Briar Rose," she said. "The fairy's curse cannot be undone, but I can change it a little. She will prick her finger, but instead of dying, she will fall into a deep sleep that will last 100 years. There was a great hubbub in the hall as everyone discussed the events. The following day, the king issued a proclamation ordering that all spinning wheels and spindles were to be destroyed. Throughout the land there were great fires as the spinning wheels were burned. Over the years, the princess grew into a lovely girl. All who met her were enchanted by her. Eventually the bad fairy's wish was forgotten. All spinning wheels and spindles had been destroyed, so there was no reminder, and the fairy was not heard of again. And so, on Briar Rose's 16th birthday, the king and queen were due to arrive back from a faraway visit. There was to be a large birthday party for the princess. Briar Rose was wandering around the palace. Everyone was preparing for the party, so she could please herself where she went. As there were still parts of the palace that she had never set foot in, she decided to go exploring. "I wonder what is in the great South Tower," she said. All the servants and courtiers wished her a happy birthday as she made her way across the palace. That part of the palace was very old, and there were very few people there. The base of the tower was in a corridor. The entrance was a small, very solid-looking door. The key was on the outside. "It's very stiff," said the princess, as she turned the key. "There, it's open." Stairs led up the tower in front of her. She began to climb them. Meanwhile, her parents had arrived back at the palace. "Has anyone seen the princess?" asked the king. "Today is her 16th birthday, the day when the curse may fall. Somebody must know where she is." Nearly everyone had seen her, but nobody knew where she had been going. "She must be found," said the queen. "If the prophecy is to come true, today is the day." A search of the palace and the grounds began. Meanwhile, the princess had reached the top of the tower, where there was another door. This time there was no key, and the door was slightly open. "There must be a wonderful view of the rest of the palace and grounds from the window," said the princess. Then she heard a strange, whirring sound. It was unlike anything that she had ever heard before. She pushed the door open and went into the room. There, in the middle, sat an old woman, working at a spinning wheel. Behind her was an enormous bed. The wheel was making the noise. "What are you doing?" asked Briar Rose. "I have never seen one of those before. What is it?"
"It is a spinning wheel," said the old woman. "Would you like to try it, my dear?"
"Oh, may I?" asked Briar Rose. She sat on the stool in front of the wheel, and the wheel whirred round. As soon as she touched the spindle, she pricked her finger. She fell to the floor in a deep sleep. The old woman, who was really the 13th fairy in disguise, picked her up and laid her on the bed. At that moment, all over the palace, people began to fall asleep. The cooks who were preparing for the party fell asleep over the stirring and tasting. The scullery maids fell asleep over the washing up. The laundry maid fell asleep over her washing. The chambermaids fell asleep while they dusted, polished, and prepared for the party. The king and queen, the courtiers, and the guests fell asleep in the great hall. The guards fell asleep at their posts. The search parties looking for the princess fell asleep while they searched, in the gardens, in the corridors, in the spare rooms, and some in the oldest part of the palace. Even the flies fell asleep on the stable walls. The birds and the butterflies fell asleep in the palace gardens. So did the wild rabbits that raided the palace vegetable gardens. The gardeners and their helpers, who were busy chasing off the rabbits, fell asleep in mid-chase. In the hearths, the fires died down, and the meat stopped cooking. The kitchen maid stopped plucking the chicken. The entire palace fell asleep, along with the princess. A hedge of briar roses sprang up around the palace, protecting it from the outside world. Years passed, and from time to time a king's son would come to the famous briar hedge to try and find the mysterious sleeping princess that the legend spoke of. But none got through. The hedge was too strong, and the princes were cut to bits. 100 years passed, and the tale of the Sleeping Beauty, as the princess was known, became a great legend. Very few people believed she existed. One day a king's son came to the nearby village.
Legend says, an old man was speaking in the village square, legend says that the princess lies asleep behind that great briar hedge just outside the village. In my grandfather's day, you could see the topmost turret of her tower, so they say.
The prince stopped to listen. "Where can I find this hedge?" he asked.
"Just beyond the village, young sir," said the old man. "If you're going to try, you'll need more luck than the other young men who have had a go."
"I shall try," said the prince. "We have heard of Sleeping Beauty in my kingdom." The prince went to the hedge and held up his sword. He went to strike at the hedge, but where his sword met the thorns, great roses bloomed instead. A path opened for him, for the 100 years were up. The curse was lifting. The hedge seemed to disappear before him. He went through into the palace grounds, walking past the sleeping rabbits, birds and butterflies, and the gardeners at their work. The kitchens were full of cooks and maids who hadn't moved for 100 years. They were all fast asleep. Even the king and queen, who were seated at the table in the great hall, were sleeping soundly. The prince walked on through the palace, making his way to the tallest tower, where he climbed the stairs and entered the tower room. There on the bed he saw Briar Rose fast asleep. "She is so lovely," he said. He had fallen completely in love with her. "How can I wake her?" He leant over and gently kissed her. Briar Rose's eyelids flickered, and she woke up. The first person she saw was the prince, and she fell in love with him. Together they walked down to the great hall. The king and queen were just waking up when the prince and Briar Rose entered. The cooks in the kitchen woke up to carry on preparing the food, and the chambermaids carried on with their work. The party was still to be held, but it was an engagement party instead of a birthday party. The prince and Briar Rose were to be married. The hedge disappeared, and the village saw the palace again and realized the legend had been true. The bad fairy was never heard of again.
Ugly Duckling. Once upon a time, there lived on a farm a mother duck. She was very excited because in her nest she had 6 eggs. Every day she sat on her eggs, waiting for them to hatch. She couldn't wait for the day when she'd have 6 baby ducklings to look after. One day she heard a tapping sound coming from the eggs. "At last!" cried Mother Duck. "The eggs are hatching!" One by one, the eggs cracked open, and each time a fluffy yellow duckling popped out, until there were 5. "Only one more to go," said Mother Duck, who was already very proud of her 5 beautiful ducklings. So she sat back on her nest, waiting for the last egg to hatch, with the other 5 ducklings waiting with her. A few days later, the last egg still hadn't hatched. Mrs. Chicken, from the other side of the farmyard, came to visit.
Shouldn't you be on the pond teaching those young ducklings of yours to swim, Mother Duck?
I would, replied Mother Duck, but I'm still waiting for this one last egg to hatch. All the other ducklings were getting bored and wanted to get on the water to learn to swim. And finally, 2 days later, they heard a tap, tap, tap from the last egg.
Hurrah!
They all cried.
The egg is hatching!
And they all sat eagerly awaiting the 6th little duckling to hatch out. Finally, one last crack, and out popped the last duckling. And what an odd-looking fellow he was. Instead of being round and soft and fluffy, like the other 5 ducklings, he was sort of grey and straggly and ugly. Oh, said Mother Duckling.
Oh,
said the other ducklings. Mother Duck decided to take all her ducklings for a swim and wanted to see if her new duckling could swim like a duck, because he certainly didn't look like a duck. Well, the ugly duckling could swim. In fact, he could swim very well. But as he got older, he just got more and more ugly. Everywhere he went, all over the farmyard, the other animals laughed at him. Even his brother and sisters started to laugh at him because they thought he was so ugly. And it all got too much for the little duckling.
why am I so ugly?
He would say to his mother.
You're not, my dear, you're just different, she would reply. Well, I don't like being different.
One day, when the teasing and laughing got too much for the ugly duckling, he decided to run away. He didn't know where he was going or what he was going to do, and even though he was going to miss his mother, he just couldn't stand being laughed at any more. After walking for a whole day, he found a lake. There were some other big ducks on it that he didn't know, but they were leaving, and he was glad about that. All he wanted to do was hide his ugly face away from everybody. There were some long, thick reeds at the side of the lake, and the ugly duckling made up his home in the middle of the reeds, where nobody could see him or find him. He came out once a day to fetch some food for his dinner, and sometimes he would see other birds flying by, but he always hid before they could see him.
I'm so ugly, he would cry. Nobody should see a face as ugly as mine.
The ugly duckling stayed in the thick reeds all through the winter. Some months later, he noticed it was getting warmer. Spring must be here, he thought. He felt bigger and stronger, but still very ugly. There were other animals around again, and it was getting harder and harder to hide from everybody. One sunny day, he was having a quiet swim around on his part of the lake, when he was surprised by some beautiful, large, white birds.
Hi,
said the ugly duckling shyly.
Who are you?
We're the swans, said the large white birds. We've not seen you before, said the swans. Would you like to join us?
Me?
cried the ugly duckling in surprise.
Join you? Oh, no, I couldn't, you see. I'm just an ugly duckling.
Ugly, said the swans. You're not ugly, you're beautiful. You're a swan, just like us.
Me? A swan?
Yes. Look in the water and see yourself. And sure enough, when he looked down in the water, it wasn't an ugly duckling he saw, but a beautiful white swan.
I'm not ugly. I'm a swan.
The Tin Soldier. Once upon a time, long ago, a little boy was given a box of tin soldiers as a birthday present. He opened the box and saw that there were 25 soldiers inside, all lying smartly in a row. They were beautifully painted, with bright red jackets and navy blue trousers, each one a work of art. The little boy began to take the soldiers out of the box, one by one, and stand them to attention to show the other children. But when he took the last soldier out, he found that one of its legs was missing. What a disappointment! But the little tin soldier could still stand as straight as any of the others, and looked every bit as smart and proud. The little tin soldier stood on the table and looked around. There were many toys to look at, but what caught his eye was a beautiful castle made from paper. It was perfect in every detail, with a mirror for a lake in front of it. On the lake were tiny model swans, and around it were trees. But best of all was the beautiful ballerina paper doll, which stood at the door of the castle. She wore a white floating dress and a blue sash over her shoulder, with a sparkling stone in the middle of it. She had her arms outstretched and stood on one leg, with the other kicked up high behind her. The tin soldier could not see her other leg at all. "She is one-legged, just like me," he thought, and fell in love with her there and then. The tin soldier wanted to get to know the paper ballerina, but was not sure whether she would be interested in a humble soldier such as he. "I have to share a cardboard box with 24 other soldiers, while she has that beautiful castle all to herself," he thought. Still, he did not give up hope. He lay down behind a box on the table, where he could still see the ballerina. When the rest of the soldiers were put away in their box that night, the one-legged soldier was left out. He stayed where he was, watching his beloved paper doll. The toys all came to life that night, dancing and playing around the room and making a terrible racket. The soldiers in the box rattled and shook, cross because they could not get the lid off to get out to play. But the one-legged soldier stood to attention and gazed lovingly at the paper ballerina. The other toys danced and jumped all around her, but she stood as still as the tin soldier, perfectly balanced on one leg. Suddenly, the lid of the box flew open, and out jumped a jack-in-the-box. He saw the tin soldier watching the ballerina and became very angry. "Stop staring, tin soldier!" he shouted, but the tin soldier paid no attention. "Just you wait until tomorrow," said the Jack-in-the-Box. Sure enough, the next morning, when the little boy stood the tin soldier on the window-sill, the window flew open as if by magic. The tin soldier fell down 3 stories to the pavement below, landing with his head stuck between the paving stones. The little boy came out to look for him, and the tin soldier wanted to call out, "Here I am!" But he did not think that it was the proper thing for a soldier in uniform to do. It began to rain, and the little boy gave up searching and went back inside. The rain poured down upon the tin soldier. He stayed stuck there between the paving stones until the rain stopped, when some other boys came along and spotted him.
"Look, a tin soldier,"
said one.
"Let's send him sailing down the gutter."
The little boys found some newspaper and made a boat for the tin soldier. They picked him up and put him in the boat. Then they set the boat down in the rain-filled gutter. The water was flowing fast, and the boat was carried along with the current, tossing from side to side. The boys ran down the pavement, clapping and cheering. The tin soldier began to feel quite seasick as the boat was thrown about in the water, but he kept himself firmly to attention, his rifle on his shoulder. The boat sailed on down the gutter until it came to a drain. Down it went with the tin soldier still inside, into the sewer below, dark and frightening. "That Jack-in-the-Box has done for me for sure," thought the tin soldier. "If only my beloved ballerina doll was with me, then I would not care what happened." Just then, a great water rat stepped in front of the boat.
"What are you doing here?"
demanded the rat, baring its yellow teeth.
"Have you got a passport?"
The tin soldier remained at attention and did not reply. The boat sailed on, with the rat chasing behind, calling out,
"Stop! Stop! Show me your passport!"
The water flowed even faster, and the soldier could hear a roaring sound, getting louder and louder. They were reaching the place where the sewer flowed out into a canal. No matter how frightened he felt, the tin soldier never moved as he lay in the newspaper boat. He kept himself straight, with his rifle at his shoulder. Whoosh! The water spilled out of the sewer pipe and down into the canal. The tin soldier was swept right down the waterfall and landed with a splash in the canal. The paper boat filled up with water and began to sink. Stiff and straight as ever, the tin soldier felt himself going down in the murky waters. He thought of his pretty paper ballerina and realized he was probably never going to see her again. He thought he was going to die. The waterlogged newspaper boat went to pieces, and the tin soldier fell through. At that very moment, a great big fish swam up. It snatched the tin soldier up in its mouth and swallowed him whole. It was dark and cramped in the stomach of the fish, but the tin soldier remained as staunch as ever, lying full length, still shouldering his rifle. He could feel the fish twisting and turning violently as it swam. It was even worse than being in the paper boat in the gutter. Then all of a sudden, the fish was still. The tin soldier did not know what was happening. He lay there, absolutely still in the blackness, for a long time. The next thing he saw was a flash of steel, and then daylight streamed down upon him. The fish had been caught and taken to market, where it had been sold. And now it was in the kitchen, and the cook was cutting it up and preparing it for dinner.
"Look, a tin soldier!"
exclaimed the cook, and she took him out of the fish to clean him up. The tin soldier was washed and then taken into the parlour. Everybody was interested to see what the cook had found inside the fish. What a strange journey for a toy to go on. The tin soldier had been through such an ordeal that he thought that nothing could surprise him. He concentrated on keeping himself straight and proper, always to attention, as a soldier should be. He was taken from the cook's hand and set to stand on the table. It was then that the tin soldier realized that he had found himself back in the very same house as before, with the same children and the same toys. What luck! The tin soldier was overjoyed to see the paper ballerina still in her place at the door of the paper castle. She stood unwavering on one leg, as steadfast as he had been. The soldier could have cried with happiness, but that would not be a proper thing for a soldier to do. So he simply gazed at the paper ballerina with his heart full of love, and she gazed back at him. But the Jack-in-the-Box was not finished with the tin soldier. He still had evil to work. And so it was that one small boy suddenly picked up the tin soldier and, without any reason, threw him into the fire. The heat was terrible, but the tin soldier kept his eyes on the ballerina. Scraped and battered after his journey, he remained as brave as ever. Was it the fire or his love for the ballerina which caused such a heat? The tin soldier did not know, but he could feel himself begin to melt as he stood there, watching his beloved paper doll. Then a door was opened in the room and a draught blew in. It caught up the paper ballerina and swept her into the fire beside the tin soldier. She burst into flames and disappeared, just as the tin soldier melted. Next morning, when the maid was cleaning out the fire, she found that the tin soldier had melted right down. All that was left was a lump of tin in the shape of a heart, and all that remained of the paper ballerina was the sparkling stone from the middle of her sash, blackened with soot.